Oh my goodness, I felt so bad for Jamie when he had that wardrobe malfunction on stage.
Yeah, well, luckily he was a good sport about it. I'm sure his church family is still laughing with him about all of that.
Well, speaking of laughing and having fun, Linda went out and talked to a few people to get their most ridiculous stories. Let's go check it out. You're gonna love it.
I'm back again in this series on trust, where Corey and I have been connecting with different people to hear how they trust God in their lives. Today, I'm going to hang out with a few different people who each have experiences that in one way or another may seem ridiculous, but when you trust God with all of your life, things can get interesting. I'm here with Alex, who has a story that sounds pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, so a few years ago, I was working on a feature film. And we wanted to shoot a scene at a fall fair. And so we did our paperwork, we got our permits, and off we went. And that night I was on camera, and we had been shooting for hours and hours, and finally we had filled up our memory card. And so I took it out, put it in my pocket, completely forgot about it. And as the night went on, we took off, just so happy we got what we wanted. A few days later, I went back to the studio, and I couldn't find the memory card anywhere. So I started panicking, I was freaking out, but I decided to take a moment and just pray to God. And I felt in my spirit God saying, the memory card is back at the fall fair. So I got back in my car, drove there, parked the car, opened the door, and sitting in the grass was the memory card. You know how small this thing is? This is tiny. In that moment, I thought, how is this memory card still sitting here? How hasn't some kid just picked it up or someone run over it with their car? And I ended up taking the footage back to the studio, editing an amazing scene that didn't end up making the final cut of the movie.
Natalie set out on an exciting new adventure to walk the Camino de Santiago in Spain. And while she was there, she asked God to speak to her in new and different ways. Natalie, why don't you tell us about that?
The Camino de Santiago is this massive 800-kilometer hike, and I chose to do the last 120 kilometers of it. And while I was on that journey, I had this really cool experience with God. I asked him to speak to me in new and fresh ways, and he definitely did. So this one day, I had been praying about a relationship that I was having some difficulty with, and I wasn't really sure what to do. And so I had spent time as I walked praying about it, and when I had finished walking that day, I'd walked about 18 kilometers and spent a lot of that time talking to God. And I took a shower and pulled out all of my fresh, dry, comfy clothes. And one of the things that I had bought on that journey was a pair of underwear. And so I pulled out this pair of underwear, and on the inside band of the underwear, it actually said, "Be the light." And I know it sounds ridiculous, but it actually felt like that was God's answer to prayer. He was telling me that in that relationship, I need to be the light. So I ran into the bathroom, and don't worry, I was fully clothed, yelled to my friend. I was like, Nina, I think God just spoke to me through my underwear. And she laughed and thought it was completely ridiculous. I knew in that moment that that was God's answer to my prayer about my relationship. He wanted me to be the light. And I think that God does choose to speak to us in kind of ridiculous or sometimes even bizarre ways. And because I know him and I trust him, I know that that was him speaking to me.
I loved these stories. With each one, I think, really? But then I realized that God is not restricted in the way that he communicates with us.
Yeah, he wants to communicate with us in ways that can blow our minds. We simply need to ask him, be ready to receive it, and trust him when he does.
I totally agree, Corey. Let's break into our small groups now and see what this looks like in our lives.